embrace humility. You learn from both, the more experienced and the less experienced. To date, in my office, we take interns, we take pupils, some of them from this university. And I will propose something. They will come to my office and say, sorry, Mr. Nyaoga, I think I have another view of this. And I'll tell them, sit down. And I will see their view, it makes sense, and I will embrace it. I do the same with older people. When I have a problem, a legal problem, I'll call an older person. And by doing so, I'm not saying I don't know, but I want to learn more. And as you go about in your career, if you embrace humility, you embrace personal discipline, you are focused, you are consistent, you take initiative, the sky is the limit. As you sit here, your potential is like your muscles. If you go to the gym today, you can grow your muscles. But if you sit where you are, the muscles will sit where they are. There are a lot of people that have potential that is not exploited. So you sit on it, they say that young man, that young lady has potential. Then so what? If you are not exploiting your potential, you will never grow. This gentleman sitting next to me here, who is now a teacher here, was my student. That is a man that had very good attitude, good demeanor, and because of that, he is now currently doing his PhD in Counsel. There's none of you here that is doomed to fail. You can get where you want to get. Only if you are focused. There's nobody here who is doomed to fail. I've given you just a little tip of my career path. Just a very, very short one. But I'm sure at some point we can share much. I have no doubt that in this group here, we have the majority of you who can scale the heights. You can get where you want to get. You can. Only if you take initiative and push yourself to the next. I was tasked with the responsibility of drafting the BRIBERY bill. And I was working with the private sector alliance. And I drafted the bill, but we had assistance from the American, the British government. We were then linked with a UK law firm called Freshfields, and we generated a bill. But happily, the bill now is law, it's an act of parliament. That is the BRIBERY bill, or the BRIBERY Act 2016. Why the BRIBERY bill? Now, a lot of you will ask yourselves, we have a lot of laws. Why do we have a problem of corruption in the country? What is the challenge? What is it? Is it the laws, or we need to do something more? Now, why then the BRIBERY bill? Ladies and gentlemen, there is a very strong link between poverty in our continent and corruption. Currently in our country, we have a ballooning youth population. We have high unemployment. We have we lack resources, but also we use our resources very inefficiently. We suffer from poor governance. But our efforts to resolve some of these problems are frustrated by corruption. Unfortunately, in the past, we mirrored much more, we focused much more on corruption in the public sector. But ladies and gentlemen, there are two sides to the coin. The private sector was left out there and they ran amok. In the past, you could not prosecute a private corporation or officials of a private corporation in a corruption-related offense. Therefore, there was need that we have in place laws that focus, that address corruption in the private sector. What is the problem, or what problem does corruption cause in our society? Just need to say a few things. Waste, causes waste. Misallocation of resources, both human and financial. It suffocates the private sector activity and entrepreneurship. It causes distortion in distribution of resources between the rich and the poor. But again, the fight against this problem is a global public good activity. Victims, they suffer from the effects of bribery. Culprits, they perpetrate bribery. There are two actors in the issue. Okay? There's a willing seller, there's a willing buyer, if you wish. The private sector is not innocent. Now I'll give you a few instances where, because of the involvement of the private sector in this activity, the economy has been visited with suffering. Transfer pricing. How many of you know transfer pricing? Anybody? This is a taxation phenomenon. Transfer pricing basically means that if you have a foreign corporation here, right, that is doing business in this country, to ensure that they pay less tax, they then enter into an arrangement with an overseas entity, whom, instead of paying 100 million, for example, they show in the books that they are paid 400 million, and that entity is part of that Kenyan entity, so that they move the money there, and they show the money that they are paid as an expense, which then translates to that entity operating here paying less tax. Okay? What about mispricing? Who does it? The private sector here exports goods, say, overseas. Now, when you export those goods, you can engage in all sorts of malpractices. You can under-invoice or over-invoice. How do you under-invoice and why do you under-invoice it? You under-invoice, okay? You get under-invoicing so that you pay less tax. Okay? The over-invoicing also pays, or rather plays, the same role. Now, if you look at the standards, we've been complaining of getting substandard goods from overseas. Private sector imports, we have Kenya Bureau of Standards. So what happens? They stamp that the goods of a certain quality when they are, when they are not. It's the private sector. Who bribes officials in the land's office? Who bribe officials in KRA to make sure they don't pay their taxes? Who will bribe officials in the Commons Registry? Private sector. Why does this happen? It happens because our systems, processes, and the procedures are inefficient. You go to the land's office, you want to conduct a transaction, the file is missing. So the official there makes sure that you pay them so that the file can appear. The same thing happens in various government departments. I have been handling procurement disputes. When you see in the newspapers, two private sector players fighting over tender, it means that one may have employed certain officials within government to ensure they obtain that tender, and perhaps given money, and the other company has done the same. Now, we have a new law in place to deal with this phenomenon. Why is it possible that this is perpetrated? There is a culture of secrecy in this country. Today, if I wish to give Joshua money, what do? Will I give him the money like this? What do we do? I know you guys do it. It's your money. He's not forcing it from me. What do? What do you do like this? Why? The culture of secrecy. As in Kenya, you can't just give somebody lots of bodies like this and then you. Am I right? Yes. It's a culture of secrecy. What are some of the provisions of this act? This act, under section 5, it makes it an offense for one to give bribes. But also, it makes this an offense under section 6 for one to receive a bribe. So it's dealing both with the giver and the receiver. It makes even bribing foreign officials here an offense. It goes further to provide that where with the consent or connivance of directors of a corporation or senior officers, that entity fails to put in place procedures to deal with bribery, then that director or senior officer is guilty of an offense. That is section 9(2). But it also extends this to associated persons, so that if you today make somebody your agent to convey some money, to be your agent for bribery, that agent is equally guilty. Okay? Because these bribes are given with the intention of obtaining business or retaining business or other advantage. But if you assist a person as a private entity to give or receive a bribe, then the entity itself will be deemed to have committed an offense. It's not many countries in Africa, perhaps Kenya may be the second one with this sort of act. In the US, in the UK is very serious. The other day I was reading something in the Times, and Trump, in his characteristic style, was lamenting that US companies are losing business overseas to Chinese because it is an offense for them to give bribes to obtain business, and yet other people are doing it. But it's a very serious offense because there are a lot of companies that have faced penalties for engaging in bribery. Now, the Act as an extraterritorial operation, okay, that if you are an entity operating in Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania, if the bribery takes place in Tanzania, you are still liable. You can't say that the bribery took place outside jurisdiction. You are liable. Now, but also, this act makes it an offense to harass or intimidate whistleblowers or witnesses or informants. Now, believe me, you, under the Act, if you use your position in a manner that confers an advantage to another person, your act is captured by or under the Act. Today, if you are queuing to obtain a service, and the person that is serving the people in the queue decides that number 10 should come to be number 1, it is an offense. Because that person has used his position to confer an advantage to another person. There are various penalties that are prescribed under the law. Imprisonment for a term up to 10 years, with a fine of 5 million or both. But there is also a mandatory fine equal to 5 times the amount of the benefit or loss, okay, or a mandatory fine equal to 5 times the amount of benefit and 5 times the amount of loss. It's quite punitive when you know the number. Where, as a consequence of the conduct constituting the offense, the person receives a quantifiable benefit. Okay. It's a loss of X, so 5 times of that loss. If there's a benefit, 5 times of that benefit. But also, there's a remedy provided under the Act for restitution, returning whatever that institution has taken. Confiscation of property acquired as a consequence of the advantage received is one of them. You can be barred from holding public office and from being elected or appointed to a public office. You can be barred, I'm sure some of you have looked at the Companies Act. There are various very punitive sanctions against directors of private entities that have been provided for under that Companies Act. So you can be barred from serving as a director or a partner in a firm in Kenya for a period of not more than 10 years. Private entities may be disqualified from transacting business. Now, if you as an entity, you have engaged in a procurement and you bribed, under the Public Procurement Act, we have disbarment provisions, blacklisting, as it were. But unfortunately, the enforcement has remained very, very poor. I am not aware of any entity in Kenya that has been debarred from participating in government tenders.
I'm not aware of any. So the enforcement has remained very poor in that regard. Now, EACC, which has run controversies, has a role to play under the Act. So that in addition to the functions under Section 252 of the Constitution, EACC can develop and promote standards and best practice in integrity and in corruption, develop a code of ethics, but also work with other public entities to develop or promote standards and best practices in dealing with this vice. But also, they can investigate but also, and recommend to DPP any violations that need to be prosecuted. Now, but under Section Article 31 of the Constitution, EACC is required to monitor the practices and procedures of public bodies, because you remember I mentioned that because the practices are bottlenecks, practices, procedures, systems are bottlenecks, this then helps corruption to thrive. So EACC is supposed to monitor to ensure that those procedures, those systems, those processes are working. Ladies and gentlemen, the Act is available. You can read and familiarize yourself with some of the provisions. But in a nutshell, that is what the Act provides. But let me say this, and I said this from the very beginning of my talk, that you can have the best laws, you can have the best constitution, but the devil is in execution. How many of you remember Michuki? How many of you remember Michuki? What do you remember about it? Let one person tell me, if you can volunteer yourself. What do you remember about Michuki? Yeah.
How he enforced, he made public means of transport, have speed governors, he really streamlined the public transport system.
Precisely. Enforcement, implementation. And we kept on saying, talking about Michuki's laws, yeah? But did Michuki come up with any new laws? He didn't. He went to environment, he did the same things. The point I'm making is this, that in this country, we have got more architects and fewer bricklayers. What we need is people to lay the bricks, people to implement. And therefore, as we soldier on, we hope that we shall change our culture so that we have an execution or implementation culture. That is a challenge we face as a country.
My name is Kennedy. I'm a law student in the 4th year. Mine is a comment. The BRIBERY Act is an ingenious piece of legislation. But we have a history as a nation. And our history goes beyond legislation. We have a history of legislating everything. Because as it is said, when a man has an hammer in his hand, every problem is a name. And therefore we have legislated, and re-legislated matters. But the issue of corruption in this country is an issue of ethics. It's an issue of morality. It's an issue of what I do when nobody is watching and nobody cares. So the BRIBERY Act will bring a lot of issues because the bulk of corruption today is in the private sector. Let us forget people who have been catwalking in town with sacks full of money, stolen from government, others with non-carcinogenic wheelbarrows, stashed from public coffers. But the bulk of corruption sits in the public sector. We've had banks put under receivership because of insider lending. So, as you have said, the problem is not just having a law. The problem is implementation and looking at ourselves as Kenyans. Because we are tired of the issue of corruption in this country. It has caused us a lot of pain. We are going through very tough economic times. And no matter how we legislate, without looking at ourselves as Kenyans individually, we will not be able to solve this issue of integrity. If we look at the Constitution, we have a very unique Supreme Law. Article 10, which introduces what is called national values of governance and principles, or a normative value system through which our society, both democratic and in our private capacity, should be ordered. And one of them is integrity. We are very busy pointing to people in the public sector to Chapter 6 and telling them that this is the measure of integrity that you should live by. But we do not look at ourselves in our individual capacity and say, myself as Ken, what am I doing about it? Because it takes two to tango. It takes one to give, it takes another to receive the bread. So it is incumbent upon us, and I would like to challenge us, the young people in this room, that we have to provide the paradigm shift. Because the law is proven, it has failed. The EACC has failed. We have people who have confessed in front of parliamentary committees that they carried money in sacks. And what has happened? That's a confession. That's a confession. KRA is next to government, but we never saw KRA walk to arrest that person and perhaps put them at Parliament police station. So this is a question of, the serious question of integrity. We need to relook at our moral values. We need to relook at our ethics. It is difficult to legislate morality, but we can look at it as individuals and work on it. Thank you very much, Mr. Nyaoga, for gracing the occasion to be part of our public speakers. I think as a faculty of law and as the faculty representative for law, I would say that we are very much honored and humbled to have you. Thank you very much.
Maybe I need to say one thing. I think, Kennedy, thank you very much for that welcome. I think I agree with you entirely, and I have one or two things just to add. Yes, the bulk of the corruption is the public sector, but with who? Okay? With the private sector. Because remember that one of the biggest buyers is the government. And therefore they advertise tenders. Those tenders go out there, the private sector does what? They bid. They are the ones then who give bribes so that they can gain advantage or get those tenders. Integrity is a big question. Last year or the year before, I spent 5 months in Makueni inquiring into that county. And I recommended the solution of that county. The president overruled me, but that is his constitutional right. But there are many things which shocked me. And I can give you one or two. One day, one of the parties, the speaker, because it's on record now, the report is available. In fact, I need to send a copy to your library here because there are a number of things that I talked about in that report. So the speaker, we asked the speaker, Mr. Speaker, you have a problem with the governor. And this is putting the county in jeopardy. Why can't both of you go home so that we can have fresh elections? So he says to me, Mr. Chairman, no. I have children. I have expenses. I spent money during the last elections. I have to recover back my expenses. What is he telling me? He's telling me that I want to be in office so that I can be able to engage in certain acts that I can recoup. Is anybody here from Makueni? You didn't hear what I said. Then, one day we have an MCA sitting in the witness box. So he says, we went to China for benchmarking. So I say, okay, Mr. So-and-so, what did you benchmark? So tell me, what did you learn? So he says to me, I can't remember what I learned in the trip. I put it down in some notes. But the only thing I can remember is that there were very nice beds. So I asked him, Mr. So-and-so, did you go benchmarking or bed marking? Of course, I didn't get an answer, and I'm still waiting for the answer. The point I'm making here is that people use public office, okay, to gain advantage. I'm the chairman of CBK now. People come to me every day because they believe that we're in the old regime where, because of your position, you can then give them advantage. Lawyers come to me and say, now, Mr. Chairman, can you put me in the panel so that when I earn legal fees, we can share? Okay. Because that's the culture now in the country. Suppliers come to me and say, I wish to supply currency. So can I be given the tender? So the point I'm making, it begins with us. And I like what Kennedy said. That paradigm shift. I was driving on this road one day, the bypass, and a policeman stops me and says, you're overspeeding. So I say, was I? Show me that I was overspeeding. So he says, the man with the camera is 5 kilometers away. So I say, I'll sit here and wait for him to come and show me. So he says to me, but you said you are in a hurry. I said, no, I am not. So then I say to him, give me the ticket. He says the ticket, if I give you the ticket, he didn't know I'm a lawyer, he didn't know who I was. It is going to be very expensive in court. So I asked him, are you the one who is going to pay? So then he says to me, but if you talk to me, then you go. So I say to him, Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Policeman, as you are standing here, if I were to check your pocket, I'll find 100 bob, 50 bob, all over you. And can I come out and check? So the man says to me, oh, give me a minute. So I told him, I'm not giving you a minute. I can call your bosses to come and check you. Now, what happened was very dramatic. Because this guy, when I talked to the other guys, they picked their spikes, put them in their car, and left. Because I took a position. Now, a lot of us don't want to take a position because we feel we're going to be inconvenienced. So that's why I say, I like what Kennedy said. It has to begin with us. Maxwell, okay?
From the Faculty of Commerce. So first of all, I'd like to appreciate or give my vote of thanks to your presentation and to turn this particular moment. So I'd like to know just something small, if it is true, if there's a truth behind this. There's this tale that the men behind the bus, that they are the one who usually promote this, the thing you call corruption through the bribery. So is it true, or is it just some tales which don't have the facts? So if there's some truth inside it, do you think that are we in a position to arrest this particular thing we call the corruption thing? So I would like also to inquire. I'm in the Faculty of Commerce, and I love my faculty of the course I'm taking very much. But I'd like to know, is there a channel I can use also to venture to become one of the learned friends?
I just have one concern about the BRIBERY Act. We usually say that we should create solutions to our very own problems. African solutions to African problems. Yet, I was wondering, why not For example, when you look for a remedy for example, for the offense where you give a bribery in the court, why not ensure that whatever act, okay, for example, if you're being bribed so that you don't have to build a road, let's say the Rongai to Langata Road, it's terrible and the MP doesn't feel like building the road, so he goes through the back door to avoid doing his responsibilities. Why not as a remedy include that instead of restitution or jail, why not ensure that that road is actually built as a remedy? Because what we as a common people care about, the Wanjiko cares about the services, not about whether that person will go to jail, because they'll still come out and probably just do the same thing anyway. So why not recommend that for whichever action was being prevented by the act of bribery, by the act of giving money to as a gift or anything, why not ensure that that act is actually done? If it's about ensuring that the university has implemented certain policies and probably gives bribery to an official in the government so that they can avoid being probably fined or something, why not ensure that they actually implement these policies? It may be actually a better way to ensure that we move on while implementing the law and giving this profession the service that it deserves. Yes, thank you.
Maxwell, you asked me whether you have become a learning friend. I can say you can become a learning friend. That's okay. You can follow my footsteps because I was in something else. You are still young. It's never too late. Learning is from womb to tomb. From the day you are born until the day you die. Now, yes, in the legal profession, yes, there is a lot of corruption in the bar. Today, there are many lawyers I will never trust with 10 bob. That is the truth of the matter. There's a lot of rot in professions, the legal profession included. These are sometimes you have a lawyer on the other side whom you know bribes judges. And you are more scared to appear before that judge because maybe they have some arrangement and you want your case not to go to a different judge. Not because you have bribed the other judge, but because you will have fairness. So in the legal profession, we have a serious problem. And even these judges we appoint, you saw the vetting that took place, but we still have the problem in the judiciary. And these lawyers are the ones that are used. There are many times that people come to me and say, I have this case, and I've come to you. Do you know Judge so-and-so? So I asked this guy, are you coming to me because I know the judge, or are you coming to me because I am competent to do your case? A few years ago, I was doing a brief for a client, and this client came to me and said, look, I don't want to work with you anymore. So I said, why? Because I need a lawyer who is a thief. And it was as clear as that. And you are not a thief. So I said, okay. But I told him, you know what? A thief steals from everybody, including the principal, like you. So he said, no. So he went to some lawyer. The lawyer took money from him. He did not deliver the results. So he came to me and he forgot that he told me that he wanted a lawyer who is a thief. And he said, that lawyer is a thief. So he said, that is what you are looking for. Okay? So we have a problem in the profession. And it goes back to what Kennedy said, that moral fabric. somebody will see me driving a particular car, you guys come out of the law school, and you want to drive the same car tomorrow. Not possible. Okay? I was on foot. I didn't have a car when I started practicing. And if I give you a story here, you will be amused or amazed. I used to teach at USIU. I used to teach business law for people who are doing business administration. So one day I take a bus to go to USIU, which then was in Westland. And I was standing. Next to me was a man standing carrying matumbo. And we were squeezed. I was wearing a suit that was, it was a three-piece, I was a gentleman. But a three-piece from a second-hand shop. But all the same, it was smart. So, because we were squeezed, the paper in which this guy was carrying matumbo burst and it spilled into my trouser. That was 5 minutes to 5. My class was at 5. So I asked this guy, what is it? So he says, it's matumbo. He didn't look at me twice. So I came out of the bus, obviously very embarrassed. I didn't have enough time to hang around or to want change. So what did I do? And if anybody works for BBC, please don't report me. So it did remain here. So I went to the washroom and I locked the door. I moved my trouser, washed it, and used the blow dryer. And I was in class saying, good evening, students, I am here. The point I'm making is that unless you are patient, and one thing I found about young people, because I was a young person at some point, is that young people are not patient. You have the advantage of a lot of time in front of you. Don't build a house of cards because you will come down. Take your time and build one brick after another. That way you become a more grounded person. And don't strive to remain average. Because a lot of times we say, Mr. Mamani, what is the pass mark? 40. I had 20 in coursework. I just need 20 to do what? Am I talking to somebody here? Please, don't do that, because it has become very competitive. Today, if you go to a bush, which trees do you see? Which trees do you see? The tall ones, isn't it? So if you want to remain with the many trees, there are too many you can't be seen. But do what? These days they say that there are too many lawyers. They are not. They are not. You can decide to be among the few at the top. So you need to be very patient, build very patiently, and you get there. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry. Because if you're in a hurry, you steal clients' money. One time, that's why people engage in very funny acts. I was in court sitting with a lawyer who was acting for a drug trafficker. And that reminds me one thing. There's a client who came to me before I got there, and he said, I'm looking for a lawyer, but I'm looking for the lawyer of the devil. Not the devil's advocate. In fact, the way he put it, a lawyer of Satan. Basically saying he's looking for a lawyer who can do anything for them to do what? So when you are described as a lawyer of Satan, so I saw whom he picked, so I said, is this a lawyer of Satan? Now, I was sitting in court one time, and this lawyer was acting for some West African guy who was charged with drug trafficking. And they just met in court. So this lawyer says to me, I'm acting for this guy. So I say to her, totally, her name shall remain because she's a very prominent lady in society now. How will this guy pay you? You don't know him, you've just met him in court. He says, no, I've just talked to him briefly. And he tells me that when the police subjected him to ejecting sachets of drugs from the body, there's one which remained. And after we take the plea, the intention is that you'll be able to eject the other sachet, they'll sell it, and pay my fees. Let me go to Sarah's point. Sarah, yes, I agree with you. But you see, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Some of these have been tried and tested elsewhere, and it's working very well because of enforcement, because of execution. Okay? But we live in a globe, we subscribe to global best practices. And one of the global best practices is having a law that deals with the private sector that then complements the law that deals with the public sector. Yes, you are right that if a party has been denied an advantage, a service, because of bribery, we should make sure that that service is delivered. I agree with you entirely. And that's why I talked about execution, getting things done. So it's not just about punishing, because you punish, then what? That service needs to be provided. So I do agree with you that really that should be the way things ought to go. Any other questions?
I'm Brenda Ho, BRIBERY, Faculty of Law. My question is that, okay, I agree with you that the devil comes in when it comes to the execution and application of these laws. But I believe that because the laws have been made, and as Kennedy said, they have been made over and over again. So doesn't it show the fact of the bit whereby the law has been overwhelmed by the vast effects and those who cause corruption? Because if you look at the scandals that we have had, the recent ones, the NOS scandal, the chicken gate, and all these things, that none of those who have been said as suspects have been convicted, or none of them have even gone close to that process. So is it that this corruption should be institutionalized for those who say that it should, or should it not be institutionalized? And if not, then what will you do with, how can we deal with this corruption, it being seeming not to be a legal problem anymore, but now is merely vested and actually looks vested into the society. It has permeated into the roots of the society's morals. So, yes, that's the question.
Another second question? Yes.
I'm Anusia. Our question is Anusia
Mansour.
Yeah, from the faculty. Our question is, Mr. Nyaoga, don't you feel is the same law not an obstacle to executing these laws that you make? The other time we were seeing the president of Kenya being asked by this guy called Uku, the Auditor General. He was saying about going to Federal Bank of America to investigate about Nyaoga. The president was busy saying, "Guy." So you see that the same law, because the ACC starts maybe the compiling charges against you for maybe bribery and stuff. But then the same law and maybe 43, I don't know, that goes in the constitution, state the orders because my constitutional rights have been infringed, you see. So it's bureaucracy in the law that brings an obstacle into the execution of these very good laws are made by very good people like you. But then it lacks the will from the top, so the trickle-down effect is coming down. The president says that means I can steal anything. I can take it away. Thank you.
Okay. There are two questions. One was about we are overloaded. Too many laws, and the law is overwhelmed. I think I like that. Not overwhelmed. But the question is this: do we give up? Are we going to live in a society that is not regulated? Because what you've said about the laws can also be said about the Constitution. So if we don't have some legal structure, legal framework, how will we be governed? If you go to court, for example, under what framework are you going to enforce your rights? If first of all, you don't know what your legal rights are. They have to be provided somewhere. So the issue, and I like what you said, political will. Now, in our country currently, the DPP's office is independent. You know, today you can't just remove the DPP. You can't actually just order him to leave. For you to remove the DPP, you have to go through some process. Right? For you to remove a judge, you know you have to go through, because these are constitutional office holders. Okay? ESCC, the same thing. Now, if these bodies are not functioning, okay, perhaps what the president should do, and you know now in this country everybody is very teachers, is to say, if the DPP is not working, you call him to state out and say, look, I have no confidence in you. And the best thing you need to do is to resign. Now, the DPP doesn't resign. And he goes to court and says, I'm being forced to resign, and constitutionally, what you do? Okay? So we create officers under the Constitution, they are not functional, and we create institutions over institutions. You create task forces because those institutions are not functional. It is a problem. Okay. And perhaps, talking of political will, if politicians bribe their way into office, okay, why are you expecting them to have political will? They wouldn't. They wouldn't. I am here because I want to recover the money I spent in elections. The other day I went for some function. So I'm confronted by this young man who said to me, give us some money, give us some money. So I say, in my dead body. So they say, okay, one day you'll ask for our votes, we will not give you. So I said, I will not. So they walked away because they use that as a tool of blackmail, for blackmailing politicians. So where do you expect that political will to come from if these guys buy their way into office? Okay? And the unfortunate thing, and let me say this without any fear, that I wish in this country we had a one-term president. It can be 5 years, it can be 10 years, I don't care. Why am I saying this? Because the president, being a politician, will be saying that, you know, if I do this thing this way, I'm going to offend people, they may not vote for me in the next. So you end up in not doing the right thing. So if you're a one-term president, you will be saying, look guys, I don't care, I'm doing the right thing, and I'm not going to look for your votes in the next elections. So whether you are happy or not happy, I'm serving public interest. And also, if you are the one-term president, what we see now in this country, the tensions you see in elections may not be as high as they are. Why? The tensions are high because somebody says, I want to remove this guy. Okay? But if you are one-term president, the guys who will be fighting will be where? Outside, isn't it? They'll be fighting among themselves. You'll be saying, sorry guys, my time has come to an end, I'm leaving. But that debate is for another day. So I'm talking about political will. Now, let me go to Mansour's question. Mansour's question or comment. Yes, in fact, I've answered your question. Have I not? By the political way, I've answered it. Now, coming to the issue you mentioned about Eurobond, from where I sit in Central Bank, who were among the people that were accused of sitting on information. The truth, the legitimate question to ask, because from where we sit, from our paper trail, we receive the money. But the question is this, and that's the more fundamental question. How and where was the money used? Okay. If the money came in here, show us how and where the money was used, because that's the more fundamental question. Okay? But now, politicians being who they are, they will take sides, and everything will be lost in that one mind.
Can put forth, the Bribery Act seems to be legislating the morality to some extent. Now, wouldn't it be more prudent if we invested in other institutions like our education system? Because morality depends on socialization. We young people who've come from different institutions join the society without being well prepared for such environments. So when we come into the society, we just adapt the morality or the values that our society has been maintaining. So, for example, when we get off high school and when we join universities, in between, that's the first time we associate with the state. So we want identification card, we want other services rendered to us. And that's the minute we start practicing impatience or we want to bribe our way through getting the services done. But if we were well prepared in our different institutions like high schools and primary schools, and we have a strong moral value, then we wouldn't need to legislate issues like corruption. We would come out to the society with a very good moral system or moral value. Secondly, so my question is actually based on that still. Don't you think it will be more prudent if we invested in institutions, universities and other learning institutions? Yes.
My name is Sylvia Wahome. I'm a first-year student in the Faculty of Law. I have to commend you on the bill because I think it's actually really ingenious and all. But my question is, don't you think to deal with the issue of corruption more effectively, that leaders should do their work by ensuring that the citizens' welfare is first dealt with, by ensuring that people have access to education, jobs, and such other amenities, so as to avoid citizens at the citizens from the most common citizen happen to engage in corruption, so as to get access to financial services. Because I think corruption starts at the bottommost, from the bottommost sector of the society going up, because citizens don't have money.
My question is quite simply, what's the position of corporate facilitation and hospitality? Because we know corporate or even companies will always, facilitate. It's different if it's a public sector person, because that would be overt bribery. But some companies will actually put money for facilitation and hospitality. So is that a bribe under the Act?
Before you respond, I do have a question. Can you invite me and ask me questions? No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm just kidding.
Yes, in one of the recent cases we've had, one of the defenses has been in objecting to being prosecuted under the bribery bill was that at the time I committed the offense, at the time that I'm alleged to have bribed, this act has not come into operation, and therefore you shouldn't charge me over, don't charge me under that act. Right? You say that then that is a valid defense.
I am under siege now.
Thanks, Senior Nyaoga, for such a presentation. I think it's been quite eye-opening, and for those of us who are relatively young in the profession, we get inspired to hear such refreshing remarks coming from our seniors. I think being in an academic institution, my very first comment, or rather challenge, would be to our students, because this being a relatively new act, here is to an area for research, to actually find out what the real impact of this act has been. So those of you in their third or fourth year study, I think it should interest you to just find out in a way that will enable you also contribute to the academia on what the real impact, or whether there could be any deficiencies in this act that needs to be addressed. Someone could pick that up and we could share ideas. You could do an email to Senior Nyaoga and contribute to the development of the law in this country. But beyond that, perhaps just by way of a comment, I think, as my senior rightly put it, the need for the Bribery Act was long overdue, for the simple reason that you cannot really disassociate public sector, in my opinion, from the private sector, because most of the faces in the private sector, you still find them in the public sector, either through their sisters or brothers or friends, or through some faceless companies. So that if you just concentrate with the public sector, you're meeting something fundamental, that you'll still find the same faces, also very active in the private sector. So I think the law is welcome, in my opinion, because then we can deal with the loopholes that could also be in the public sector. But the truth is, and as we have seen in several scandals in this country, that most of the senior people in the public sector are also to be found in the private sector, either in their real form or in their imaginary form. So we need this law. I truly support this law, because corruption has become real, and it is even more scary with the devolution that we are talking about. We ended up devolving power, resources, and 90% that was devolved was corruption. So I think it's really important that we all support this law, and anyone who is at a position of influencing something, as a student, as an advocate, as a lecturer, I think we can join arms together and ensure that we root out corruption in entirety from our society. Thank you.
So can I Amina, I agree with you. We need to do much more, but additionally then, have the law basically to set the boundaries. Because yes, schools is all right, but what happens at home? Because the mentoring happens in school and at home. So that we have to look at this holistically. Whatever you're receiving from your parents, really documented by what happens in school. And again, yes, the moral fabric is broken down. But we need to do something about it. We need to start somewhere so that the way we enforce it. Sylvia, yes, you said that we need to perhaps bolster financial services so that the people are empowered financially. But don't forget, that this law does not just deal with financial facilitation. It deals with unquantifiable advantages that people gain. Like for example, somebody saying, go ahead of Joshua in a queue. Yeah, you gain advantage. That advantage will not be monetary alone. Hospitality, yes. Now, if the facilitation is by way of commission, you're giving a public official to gain advantage, to gain a business, it's the corruption. But if it's something that is between the public entities, the private entities, that is something else. Okay? So don't forget that this law was put in place to deal with the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the corruption that flows from the private sector to the public sector. So facilitation, yes, will be. Whether this law is retroactive, no, it's not. Okay? The commencement date is in the Act, so you can't go backwards and deal with acts that happened before the law came into force. Yes, in fact, I'll be very happy if any of you picks this area to write your dissertation on. Because it's a new area, it's a gray area, and there may not be a lot of material in the country in terms of any prosecutions, but you will have a lot of examples. I recall a few years ago, there was some quest to prosecute officials for Mumias. And the defense was, no, it is a private company, right? Now, we had issues on was it BAT? Yeah? And the problem was, there was no law to deal with private entities. So there are many examples. I'd be quite happy to guide somebody to write something in this area. Now, let me make some closing remarks, if you allow, on my part. Young people, I am indeed humbled by the invitation today to come and speak to you. I am happy to come back again to talk to you on a topic of your choice. But I'm also more than happy to be available to talk to the lawyers here, not lawyers, learning friends. Yeah, am I right? Yes. Because I'm also a learning friend. I'm learning every day. And also to mentor you, because there are many more things that we can cover that can help you to grow as a professional. One thing that I learned in my early days of practice is that there are two sides to a coin. And a lot of us, we look at what we can see, but the answer is in the area that you can't see. And once, under the tutelage of the mentor that I mentioned, looked at some case, and I gave him information from what I could see on the surface. But he says, now the information you are giving me is on the surface. And that information, even a blind person can see. What about the other side of the coin? And indeed, that's where you always found the answer. So ladies and gentlemen, I am available. I don't mind coming back here again, because one of the things that I do is to mentor young people. It gives me great pleasure because I grew to the person that I am today because I was mentored. But I'll never have been able to be mentored successfully if I did not humble myself. I wish you all the best in your journey, and I have no doubt that you are going to achieve immense and satisfactory results in your quest. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, and on behalf of everybody who's here, we want to say a big, big thank you for coming out this afternoon. There's no doubt that the talk has been very inspirational and very informative, not only for the students, but also for us. And I can't help myself but to repeat what Senior Counsel said. Look at the glass half full. Don't be demoralized if you see corruption on TV. The fact is that Kenya has enacted this law. Like he said, there are very few countries that have done this, okay? So I believe, especially for you young people, I believe you should be inspired. You're the people that are going to be in offices, and you have the tools, you have the law to help you with corruption and bribery, okay? And we definitely will be inviting him again and to mentor you and give us another wonderful talk, okay? So thank you so much. Let's give him a big, big hand. And just one last thing, please, let's sit down and let our guest first leave. You know this is a bit, okay? All right, and thank you so much for coming.
I think I forgot to mention I'm also a law student. I'm a law student, I'm a third-year law student here. I'd like to thank you for gracing us with your presence. Most importantly, on behalf of all law students, it's a privilege to have you in our faculty. We've picked more than one thing that we can share in our classrooms and implement in our cases and other projects that we work on. So let's pray. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahman-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Oh God of many names, bless us as we leave this room. Help us keep what we've learned and maybe share with one another. As our guest goes back to his work and home, bless him as he lives, protect him and be with him. We thank you very much for being with us.